Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the Players NIL podcast. My guest today, Mr. Cory Heitz. Cory, welcome to the podcast.
Mark, thanks so much for having me on.
Well, Cory, you work in a fascinating space, and we want to get to that, working with athletes at the high school and the college level, and all of the challenges of selecting a school. Now with the transfer portal, all of the challenges of where do you stay, do you go? We'll get into that. But I also want to know a little bit more about Cory, the person, and your background. So I asked this question of many of my guests, and I use two words, right? Sports and athletics. Sports is the fandom part, right? Who you grew up watching, listening to, the games you went to with your parents, your grandfather, your neighbors. Athletics is if you participated, the sports you participated in, and the lessons learned during that. So tell me a little bit about your childhood, how you got introduced to sports, and some of your early memories of being a fan.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Parkersburg, West Virginia, a little town on the river, and we moved there because my dad played basketball at West Virginia back in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was a halfway point between his parents and my mom's parents. And I got into sports because, my dad played ball. He played pro after that in Europe, and I just grew up loving that sport. And also, his older brother played at Oklahoma, and then his younger brother played at Kentucky. And then my cousins, one of them played at Morehead State, one played at Purdue, and then 14 years in the NBA. So I had five members of my family before me play Division I basketball. So growing up, I wasn't one of these kids that played a lot of sports. I dabbled in basketball, or I'm sorry, baseball and soccer, but really I was a one-track mind of doing what my other elder family members did in the sport of basketball. So that's what I grew up loving. Went to camps way younger than I should have been at West Virginia and other places around the country and world just because my dad wanted to expose me. Because one of the things he said was, look, I'm giving you all these opportunities academically and basketball wise. I'm not paying for college for you. So there was this pressure always to like take this opportunity of getting good grades and playing the sport of basketball to know like this can also lead to changing your life and getting a free education. So, yeah. And then after the first 11 years in West Virginia, we moved to Lexington, Kentucky, a little bit more modern, a lot more going on, more serious basketball. And since my uncle played there at UK, we had seen it plenty in the early 80s on our visits. And that's where I went up until graduating high school.
I love it. Well, I'm actually a basketball junkie. In the old days, I'm old enough to be called the Basketball Jones back in the 70s. It was a song about that. I actually went to five-star basketball camp at Wheeling Jesuit, Wheeling, West Virginia, back
Mhm.
in the mid 70s. And Joby Hall was the coach of Kentucky. And Jack Goose Givens was one of the counselors at the camp.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, but who are your heroes in basketball? Because obviously, tremendous basketball lineage in your life. Who were some of the college players that you followed and then followed them into the pros?
Yeah, well, my uncle was my big hero because growing up, he was playing in Kentucky from '79 to '84. So he backed up Melvin Turpin and Sam Bowie, who were two lottery picks. So for 5 years, he's battling with those guys every day in practice. So I got to go to those games. I mean, I got great seats at Rep Arena to see, Dominique Wilkins and Charles Barkley. Now, fun fact, Mark, I was coloring in my coloring book instead of paying attention to that and realizing how good I had it. But after the game, I'm hanging out with Winston Bennett and Sam Bowie and just like hanging out, sitting on Joby Hall's lap because that's how tight knit it was. So I grew up in that. So my uncle was first and foremost, even though he didn't play very much. But my favorite player growing up was David Robinson. And I just loved him, loved collecting his rookie cards when I was in junior high. And then it all kind of almost came full circle to when I committed to play at Navy. He sent me an autographed picture in the mail, and I just was through the moon until that fell through a few weeks later. But yeah, it was David Robinson, and then my cousin who played in the NBA, Brad Miller. He played for 14 years, so for 14 years, I had the NBA pass and would watch almost all of his games. And it's just weird seeing a guy you grew up with that's 6 months older than you and used to play in the cornfield in Indiana with is now an NBA All Star. So I'd say my uncle David Robinson and then my cousin Brad Miller. So I really, it's fun cheering for family and people you know.
I love it. I saw the Admiral play. They beat Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. I don't know exactly what year it was, but when he was at Navy. So, I mean, I followed him. Um, what were the lessons you learned from all of that? You're in the gym, you're in the locker room, you're in the stands, all this chatter, pre-game, during the game, post-game. You saw Players win, players lose, players get hurt, right? Had to be unbelievable impressions. What were some of the takeaways that you got from that time in your life? Lessons learned that maybe you still think about today?
Finish what you start. That's something my dad always said, and do it right the first time. So those are lessons we learned. We grew up on a farm. It was 10 acres of grass surrounded by horse farms. And my dad wanted it looking like a 10-acre golf green. And he grew up working on a golf course. So we used to fight all the time. He's 7 feet. He was 300 pounds back then. So he was a giant. And I wasn't scared of him because he was the guy preventing me from going out and hanging with my friends, is because I had to spend 14 hours a weekend, if it rained, mowing and weed eating our 10-acre grass farm, right? Just for his pleasure. So that was a big lesson there. Other lessons are be around good players and good coaches. My first year and a half in high school, I was at the biggest high school in the state. We were really good, and it just wasn't a good fit. So I transferred to the number one team in the state, which is a Catholic school in Lexington, Kentucky. And even though it was the number one team in the state, I did better there. It was a better fit for me. And every day playing against these good players, I got better too. So all the time, I'm telling people, play against older guys that are better than you. Play with better players. Play up in AAU. You're going to get better playing against better players. And I see that in life and in business too. Do things that make you uncomfortable all the time, because that's only going to help you. And that's the thing we talk about in our family. I talk about in parent groups. I talk about on podcasts, is grit, right? And growing up on a farm with a 7-foot father, I had to do these chores. There was no getting around it, right? Playing on a number one team in the state, I had to guard an All-American every day for 2.5 years and try to stop him and try to score on him. And that all prepares you for being an adult when the sports are done, when the athletics are done, to succeed in life. So where does that grit come from? It comes from doing hard things. And, a lot of our kids now are growing up a lot better situations than we grew up, Mark, and they got things too easy, right? So I'm constantly trying to figure out how, to get kids, my kids, especially my 6 and 3-year-old daughters, to make sure they've got grit. Because if they got grit in this new generation, they're going to thrive, right? Because a lot of kids don't, because their parents aren't enforcing it. They're looking for the easy way. And so long answer to your short question, but grit's one thing I learned through doing hard things growing up, and especially going to the military for my college basketball career, playing at the Air Force Academy. I think grit is so important for not just kids in general, but for our nation as a whole.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I heard a podcast yesterday, a college lacrosse coach that just finished coaching a year at the Naval Academy this year. His name is Dave Cottle. And he said yesterday on his podcast, he was a guest, that identifying talent is really easy, right? Great athletes stick out. Enough about athletics. You see a kid run down the court, you can say, he's got a little jump to him, right? You can look at his body and say, he's fit. The thing that you can't is the immeasurable, and the grit is a great word. It's the competitiveness, it's the discipline. How do you take the coaching? I personally worry about all these kids that have gotten trophies since they were 6 years old, thinking that they're the bomb. I'm in the midst of writing a book. It's been a lifelong journey. It's called 12-Year-Olds Win for All the Wrong Reasons. It's about the 12-year-old that's the tallest in his grade and becomes the leading scorer in basketball because he's the tallest, not because he's the best, not because he's the most competitive, not because he's the best coached, just because he physically was gifted differently than others. And by age 16, when it balances out, they don't have those advantages, and some kids quit, right? They don't go through. So as you work with high school athletes, and you work with parents and families in this generation of excess where kids have so much access to coaching, trainers, now NIL agents, recovery, mental health. How do you coach grit? How do you teach grit? What's your answer to that?
Well, the answer is you got to do hard things. And if you're coming to me wanting to find a prep school, because that's what my company is, I help families from around the world navigate the prep school world and find the right fitting prep school for that individual. You probably you've probably been working hard for a while, right? So people that come to me and reach out and want to do it, I'm very selective who I take on as clients. And the ones I take on are the ones that have good grades, which means you had to put in hard work, that do have a good highlight tape, which meant they had to put in hard work, that do have a good body, that do want to leave the situation they're in and better themselves and go to a better, different situation. I transferred high schools, Mark. So I went to a tougher one because I needed to find a better fit. And then after that, after graduation of high school, I had to do a post grad year at a prep school because I still wasn't ready to play D1 yet and had to go to a military prep school to do that, right? Which was not easy and not something I wanted to do. But you got to do hard things. I mean, Angela Duckworth wrote a book on this. It's called Grit, and like it's 300 pages, but the thesis sentence is you got to do hard things, right? And even these days, like I'm still trying to do that on a daily basis by either running, lifting weights, getting in my sauna, which is hot, getting an ice river here in Colorado, and doing things I don't want to do because I know like if I don't do that, I'll get soft, I'll get weak. And so when I see these kids that are trying to get to the next level, you know the ones that work hard and you know the ones that don't, and it makes it easy. And also I'm a truth teller too with a lot of kids. Like there are every about I'd say 80% of kids that reach out to me want to play D1, 50% want to play in the NBA. And I say that's great. I support that. I did too, so I get it. Just know the realities of this. Like it's going to be tough. You might go to a prep school and get a place that's not D1, not D2, not a scholarship. It might be a school you've never heard of before, where you've actually got to pay money, where there might be 23 guys on the roster. I don't care. Do you want to do it or not? This is how it is nowadays. Do you want to do it or not? It's not fair. There's a lot of people trying to do this, but that's a challenge a lot of kids want to take on. And, telling this truth to families is something they never heard before because high school coaches are scared of the kids leaving. AU coaches are scared of kids leaving their program. And it's kind of like American Idol and Simon Cowell, right? Not that I'm anywhere near his prestige, but you get people that come to those American Idol auditions and they sing and he's shaking his head like you're not ready. And they start crying like, but my mom and dad said I was a really good singer. And Simon Cowell's like, yeah, but your mom and dad are not Hollywood producers that have been doing this for 40 years. They just don't know. So I'm trying to just share this information with families, not in a harsh way, but just in a realistic way so they can take off these rose-colored glasses and know like the path to your dreams is going to be harder than you can even imagine. And yeah, you might have talent, you might have height, you might be a great shooter. As you know, Mark, there's 9 other things on top of that to make a good basketball player, right? Yeah. So doing hard things, I'd say, would be the way to instill that grit, and it's on a daily basis.
I love it. It's great advice. I hope people take advantage of it. So that segues into the next part of the conversation that is about your business. So tell us the name, tell us what you do, how'd you get started? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so my company is called Prep Athletics, and it started unofficially in 2008 when I placed a good player from British Columbia into a prep school. And why I did that is, like I said, my only chance for playing D1 was for me personally to go to a prep school. I was 6'7", 195 pounds when I graduated. My mom was 5'10", my dad was 7 feet. So I marketed myself as the white David Robinson, to where if you recruit me, I'm going to hit my growth spurt in college and be just as tall as my 7-foot dad, my 7-foot cousin, my 6'11" uncle, my 6'10" uncle. It's just a matter of time and you're going to get a great player. So I had to do prep school for that. So I went to the Air Force Academy's prep school. I haven't grown since 16, Mark. So I'm still 6'7". And I played in the Air Force Academy's program before then I graduating and serving 5 years as an officer. And then my cousin Brad Miller, who played in the NBA for 14 years, he left his senior year of high school in Indiana to go to MCI, which was a major big time prep school in the 90s. And that got him ready to play at Purdue. And he goes back and said, I wouldn't have made it to the NBA without the coach I had at MCI. So, Mark, prep schools have changed our family's trajectory. I'm not playing D1 without it. Brad's not playing in the NBA. So I placed my first player in 2008 at the same prep school Brad went to, and Brad helped finance that kid. And then I was coaching in Kentucky at the time and started, helping Kentucky kids who were really good, but just didn't get college eyeballs on them. And I think I said 8 kids to do a post-grad year at prep school, and 7 of those Kentucky kids went D1, right? Fast forward to today, this has accidentally turned into an international consulting company to where I get inquiries from kids all over the world wanting to come to America to go to one of our great boarding prep schools. And what I do as a company is I take a kid's athletics, how good he is, his academics, how smart he is, what his goal is, what kind of experience he wants, and then his finances, right? And I take all of that, and based on all the prep schools that are out there, I narrow down those 100 prep school options they have to the right fitting 3 to 5 for that individual kid and his family. And then I guide them through the process. So the way I like to explain it is I'm a prep school guidance counselor for the basketball world, and I help families decipher basketball academies from prep schools, reclassing versus doing a post grad year, the different classifications, the different regions. I pride myself on being in touch with coaches on a daily basis to just keep up with who still has positions available, what kind of financial aids available, what kind of experiences did my clients have at these schools last year, and will I send a kid there again? Will I send more kids there or help them get more kids? So there's not many of us out here that do this, but since it changed my life, since it changed my cousin's life, I want to make sure if families are looking at this world, they can reach out to me and know that I can help them navigate through this process because it's very confusing, very convoluted. There's a lot of lies told. It's not the best industry always for truth tellers, but I try to be a truth teller out there and just give everyone the information and give them the options and then let them make the choice from there.
Well, look, the college recruiting world's been filled with snakes for years, right? We've all witnessed, coaches that may or may not have told exactly the truth or all of the story, and coaches that have left, and schools that promised you playing time that you never got. So that happens. What's the right age for a kid to consider a prep school in basketball specifically?
It's case by case basis, right?
Okay.
It depends on what their home situation is, what their basketball situation is, what their financial situation is, what their academic situation is. About 70% of my clients are post grads. They realize either before their senior year, at the end of it, oh shoot, college coaches don't come to high school games anymore. I better do something. And they scramble for JUCO. They scramble for local colleges. They start writing, cold calling and cold emailing college coaches from around the country. And then they find out about prep school and they reach out to me about that option. Right.
Yeah.
There's also kids that are in a situation that might not be great and they're younger than seniors and they want to leave their school and get a jump start and maybe get 2 or 3 years into prep school. And that's about 30% of my clients, as well as the younger kids. I never want a kid to leave their high school. I wish every high school coach would do a good job, would develop their kids, would get the playing time correct for everybody, and then ultimately place these kids in college that are seniors. But that's just not the reality, right? High school coaches have other jobs. They're just not as connected. They don't have to place their kids yearly. So there's not really pressure on them to do that. The cool thing about the prep school world is that these prep school coaches have to place their final year players in college. It's not an option. It's what parents are paying for. Now, it might not be a scholarship. It might not be D1. It might not be a school you've heard of. But based on this transfer portal and all the movement going on and the college game getting older, you need an advocate these days, right? I'm an advocate for the prep school world, but these prep school coaches are the best advocates I know in the high school world on getting their kids placed, from the high major kids that come out of prep school all the way to academic D3s to everything in between, right? So for me, if I'm a kid that wants to go to the next level and I need help, you can hire a college placement consultant and they're out there, or you can get all the benefits that come from a post-grad year and work with a coach that does it, that loves placing kids at the next level and has to do it.
So it's athletics driven. I get it. That's the business that we're all in. And I think you just mentioned about the age of the college basketball programs. There's this debate now, especially this past year with Kentucky and Michigan State, always with older kids, that, maybe these 23, 24-year-old, 25-year-old kids are actually more competitive in March than the 18-year-old coming out of high school. So now you have kids in high school that are reclassifying, right? So they're somehow figuring out how to get an extra year. Then they go to prep school for a year. So they're coming out at maybe age 19 or 20 as a freshman in college. Is that true? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. And you can either do, that's just to clarify the people watching, you got 5 years to do 4 years of high school, right? So you can either reclass once or do a post-grad year after graduation. You cannot do both. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, there's very few, I'd like to know the statistics on this, but there's very few 18-year-olds that have just done 4 years of high school going straight to D1. Right. Because that year of development is huge. Between 17 and 20 is when the DNA turns on for boys to become men. Right. And personally, when I went to prep school, I did the same eating, same lifting, and I gained 20 pounds of muscle just because that's when my DNA turned on and said, hey, you can now do this physically. Right. So the game is getting older. Coaches in college want that extra year on a kid. Every year helps in development in basketball. You can make leaps and bounds from where you were previously with an extra year of reps, games, practices. So yeah, coaches are looking older. They really are. And a lot of college coaches reach out to me and say, hey, we got a good 18-year-old. He's not ready for us yet, do you know a prep school for them? And that's where, I can help college coaches out with that because I am in that prep school world where they might not know all the schools. So yeah, you got to get older, you got to get bigger, you got to get more reps in. It's the way the game's moving, and I don't know if it's going to change.
I guess there's some academic component to it too. Some kids just aren't ready for the academic rigors of college, and prep school offers that opportunity. Is that true?
Absolutely. So you've got kids that'll go to prep school for a post-grad year with, I've had a kid with a 35 ACT and a 4.5 GPA, right? I've also have kids that have below a 2.0 that have learning disabilities and everything in between. There's a prep school for everybody. I'm working with a kid right now who's got a 1.9 GPA and is failing 3 classes, and he'll be able to take summer school class online and then go to a certain prep school where they specialize in helping kids graduate, take extra time on testing if they qualify for an IEP, which is a designation that you have a learning disability, and a third party will designate that. Once you get that, you'll have extra time on tests, extra time on the SAT, ACT, and in post-grad year, you'll be able to retake 3 core classes that you might have gotten a bad grade on, right? If you don't have an IEP, you can retake 1 core class, but the IEP can help. Plus, you're at a prep school. There's no distractions from, family or the old neighborhood, and you've got smaller classroom sizes. You've got teachers that most of them live on campus, and the whole goal of prep school is to help you succeed. They're not going to try to fail you out. They want to prep you for college, right? They want to give you
Sure.
the basic study skills. They want to help you write papers. They want to give you everything you need to where when they leave you after 9 months and you step on a college campus, you're going to be able to maybe not thrive, but at least succeed and get by with the skills that you might not have had before you went to a prep school. So absolutely, Mark, prep schools they cover the whole spectrum of academics.
I love it, and I believe in it, and I am familiar with it. So in college, which I'm sure you're aware of, we have created this monster called a collective, which is really just the booster club on steroids, right? It's the collective efforts of alumni, boosters, interested parties, local businesses. I have felt, and I have said publicly for a long time, that collectives in college are, maybe at risk, but I believe that the collective model, and I know this to be true in certain cases, but I believe that it's going to be even greater at the high school level. Are you seeing collectives be a part in the recruiting of athletes for prep school, for post-grad? Has NIL entered into that?
It has. One example is Mikey Williams, who now obviously had some legal troubles, but he signed a deal with Puma a few years ago. So he's kind of a big time first timer in the NIL world for that, for high school / prep school ball. There are rumors out there that Cooper Flagg got paid to go to Montverde. There's rumors that AJ Diambasa, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, got paid to go to Prolific Prep. Those are rumors. I'm not saying it's true or not. It's just what I've heard. And then you've got OTE, the high school professional league, that's working on NIL deals for kids down there in the Atlanta area as well for their leagues. So it's only for the big time players. And it is now legal in quite a few states. There are some prep schools I'm working with to take advantage of it on a smaller level just to educate kids on. But yeah, it has started seeping into the high school / prep school world, and I only see it getting bigger now that high school stars can have agents, right? And those agents are going to want to make as much money as they can on the recognition of these kids who have a lot of social media followers. So yeah, I see the future as being more inundated with this. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it's just the reality of it.
Good and bad. I see coaches using their alumni base to raise money to attract some of those athletes too, right? The collective model of paying kids for pay for play, right? Recruiting, and in college retention and transfer portal. Where we headed? What's going to happen? Everything's getting older. Kids are staying in school more now because they can make NIL deals at the college level. All sports, right? Football and basketball. Kids are foregoing early entry into the draft because it's a guaranteed money. They get older, they get bigger. That just creates less roster spots. And so how does this pressure going to be dealt with from the prep school now that's still feeding lots of kids to colleges that don't have as many slots? What's the rub there?
Yeah. So prep school coaches are being way more selective on who they take on to be part of their team because they know they're going to have to be calling college coaches on this kid's behalf. So how much bandwidth is this kid they're looking at going to be for them to place? Right now, all these prep school coaches got their guys, right? They know, oh, I can always place this kid here on a D3 team that might have almost 30 kids because they also have a developmental team. right? So that's becoming more prevalent now. And it's in theory, D1 should be getting better, right? D2 now is getting D1 kids that they wouldn't have got before. Same with D3, same with NAI. So in theory, the game should be getting more talented as the years go by with all this, backlog happening, and kids that maybe shouldn't be playing at these levels aren't playing at them anymore. So it's trimming the fat, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's survival of the fittest, Mark. It's Darwinism. The strong will
Sure.
survive. If you don't like it, get better. If your grades aren't good enough, get them better. There is someone out there right now working harder than you at your position. And it's not all about scoring either, right?
Sure.
The example I give are clones. Let's say you got the same kid, same height, same grades, same DNA, everything. This kid averages 10 points. This kid averages 10 points, but this kid has a 3.5. This kid has a 2.9. This kid's getting taken because of the 3.5. Let's start that over again and say they're the same clones. This kid takes charges. This one doesn't. That's the kid getting taken. Let's do it again. Same thing, but this kid's a good teammate, cheers on his teammates, and is coachable. And this guy holds a grudge, jogs back on defense when he makes a mistake. Which one's the coach going to want? So everyone's always focused on scoring, and there are so many things you can do in a basketball game to affect the game and to help your team that won't show up on the sheet. That's the stuff too to look into and focus on as well, besides just scoring. You cannot have a team with 5 scores. Hell, the NBA doesn't even have teams with 5 scores, right? So find a niche or be well rounded or be that guy that does stuff that no one else wants to do. Be coachable. If you're not coachable nowadays, there's 10 players behind you that a coach will take. Be a good teammate. Make sure your grades are good. Make sure you're not getting in trouble. Make sure you're not putting dumb stuff on social media. Take a charge. Dive on the floor. Have a high IQ because you're listening to what the coach is saying during film sessions. So to me, I have no sympathy because I've been through it. My family's been through it. Players I've coached, players I've put in prep school. We've all been through it and gotten to that next level by busting our butt and doing small things. I was never a scorer. I've never been the best player on a team in my entire life, Mark. But I was the guy with sharp elbows. I was the guy that took a charge. I was the guy that scrapped. I was the guy that was a good teammate. Like we had scores. I would feed them. But I'm going to do the other dirty stuff to ensure I get minutes and can help my team. And I constantly tell players, like, it's not about the points per game. It's about the other stuff. And trust me when I say this, college coaches are looking for that. They're watching how you're warming up. They're watching how your parents are acting in the stands. They're watching how when you make a bad play, are you sprinting back to make up for it? Or are you jogging back mumbling, mad? So anyway, it can be done. It just each player needs to make their own decision on what they're going to do and then do it.
Is the same thing happening in the women's game? Do you work with girls in the same way?
I do work with girls, not as many as boys. I think I've worked with 4 this year. So my opinion on the girls' game is not worth listening to because I just don't know as much about it. I do know Caitlin Clark this year has made the game more exciting, and I actually tuned
Sure.
into her last 3 games, which I think a lot of America did. But I can't imagine that it's not getting more popular. Prep school for girls, there's a demand for them because dads don't want to send their daughters away before graduation. I got 2 daughters. I'm not sending them away until graduation. So there's a good opportunity for post grad for girls. And there's a good opportunity just to spread the word more, which I've been working on, just to let parents, coaches, organizations know, hey, if you got a girl that might be in the middle of nowhere who's never going to see a college coach, let's get her in a post grad year. She's going to get all the benefits of basketball, academics, growing away from home, being around different people, and maybe she'll get a lot of options that she wouldn't have had prior. Maybe she'll get a scholarship out of it. So that does happen every year with my clients, Mark, where they will invest a good amount of money for prep school, and at the end of it, they get a 4-year scholarship, which is like real life gambling in Vegas, right? But worst case, if they don't get a scholarship, they're still getting all the benefits that come from a post grad year, right?
The
So
academics. Yeah.
yeah, academics, getting over your homesickness, learning how to get up without mom and dad telling you, learn how to turn in assignments without parents telling you what to do, making a sandwich, doing laundry, basic skills that a lot of kids don't know how to do nowadays. They'll be prepared when they hit a college campus because they learned how to do this at a prep school. And the last thing is cultural. I mean, there's going to be kids from every time zone, from almost every continent that are at these places. And the story I tell is when I got to Air Force Academy's prep school, my roommate was a Navajo Native American. And I'd never met one of those before, right? One of those people from Arizona, let alone a Native American. And we spent most of the first night of basic training asking each other questions. And I asked him if he grew up on a reservation. Did he ride a horse? Did he shoot bows and arrows? Stuff I knew from movies. He was just as confused, Mark, about me being a Catholic kid from Kentucky. And he asked me, why does the Pope wear a big hat? And do you ride horses as well? And fast forward 20 years, he was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man in his wedding, right? So I'm not guaranteeing that's what's going to happen for a kid that goes to prep school, but that's culturally what can happen. And like my life is fuller now with him in my life.
Yeah, I love it. We could talk about this forever, Cory. If people want to get a hold of you, but they want to learn more about your program, here's your chance to shamelessly plug what you do.
Yeah, the hub for everything is prepathletics.com. Right there, if you want to ask me any question about prep school or find out if it's a good fit for you or one of your players, I've got contact information on there. We've also got articles. I've got a podcast too that has interviewed tons of prep school coaches. We talk about financing. We talk about finding the right fit. Any prep school question you want to know is on the website or on the podcast. And just know, I mean, I've been doing this now since 2008. I'm passionate about it. I love it. I want to help families like I was helped in my decision by my dad and coaches, right? So can change your life. It's a big advantage to do it nowadays. And I would love to be able to help you and serve you in any way I can. So prepathletics.com, and I'm on all the socials too, but that's the hub. You can find everything.
Perfect. I love it. I think what you're doing is awesome, and I know parents, really need the support because this is a difficult road to navigate. So, Cory, congratulations on your success. Best of luck with your daughters. It'll be interesting to see what their journey looks like. And thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate having me on.